There is an interesting situation, to say the least, unfolding regarding the Baltimore Ravens. December 4, Lamar Jackson injures his knee against the Broncos. Tyler Huntley comes in, and they win the game late thanks to Huntley's efforts. Jackson hasn't played or practiced since then. Let's hear from John Harbaugh on the status of Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley, who also is injured, had a shoulder, missed the Week 18 game in Cincinnati. The status of those two quarterbacks approaching a return to Cincinnati for the Super Wildcard round on Sunday.
I don't have any really thing to add on that. No updates at this time.
With Lamar, just one more, how comfortable would you guys be at playing Lamar if he was able to go at less than 100%?
Of course, yeah. Whatever, as long as he's safe and healthy and can play. It's for any player. It's not really just any particular player. I mean, any player goes out there, and if he's healthy and safe and he's not going to do any damage to an injury, any player, plays and does what he can to the level that he can in that situation.
John, Tyler Huntley didn't I don't think through it all in the portion that we watched. Is he doing any better with those injuries that he was dealing with?
Yeah, he's doing a lot better. He was out there at practice today and took a bunch of plays, so he had a good day today. I'd say he's on schedule, hopefully, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Tyler Huntley's going to be available. I don't know that makes enough of a difference. Lamar Jackson is clearly their best option. And, Charean, what I gleaned between the lines of what John Harbaugh said, and I've since heard some other things that causes me to believe this even more strongly. Lamar Jackson probably could play right now, probably, at less than 100%, but is choosing not to, and I fully support that. I think that's what's happening. I don't know, but I think what's happening here is he's at the point where he could play at something less than 100%. He's choosing to protect himself because he doesn't have his long-term contract. But you have to wonder at what point, not just the coaching staff in the front office, because I have sensed something close to exasperation from the coaching staff in the front office as it relates to Lamar Jackson not returning from his knee injury. At some point, you're going to get the side eye from your teammates, and they're going to wonder how committed you are to the cause. I've suggested in the past that maybe a player who hasn't gotten the contract that he deserves should hold out of a playoff game, that would be one hell of an aggressive move, but it would be one hell of an aggressive move. And it says something to the fan base. It says something to your teammates about how committed you are to pursuing the ultimate prize. And there's a point where if you're able to play, and the way that John Harbaugh laid it out, able to come back and play and not suffer a re-injury, and that applies to any player. I mean, he properly conditioned it, but lurking between the lines, the idea that, yeah, he probably could come back and play right now. And if he could, we're fine with that. Doesn't have to be 100%, as long as you can protect yourself and not suffer a re-injury. Now, I don't know how that works with a knee injury. And also, you may compensate and cause some other injury, or you're not moving like you used to, and maybe you get a hit that you didn't expect, and you get a different injury. But there's, I think, organizational frustration with Lamar Jackson right now. I sense it. I feel it. And whether that forces him to play, whether that kind of shames him into playing, I don't know. But the bottom line is he doesn't have his long-term contract, and the risk of playing this extra game beyond the regular season for 2022, a game that you don't get paid nearly as much as you ordinarily get paid, and you're putting your long-term financial future on the line, I can understand why I wouldn't want to. I mean, this is a tough one. I can understand why I wouldn't want to. I can understand why the Ravens are like, dude, I mean, you want to get yourself a fully guaranteed contract, not playing in a playoff game when you could play in a playoff game. It's kind of a tough way to get a fully guaranteed contract. This is a very difficult back and forth, an awkward tug of war between player and team that I think is playing out. And maybe it starts to bubble up even more between now and Sunday night.
Yeah, I completely understand both sides of this, Mike. And I understand if Lamar Jackson doesn't feel he is 100% to go out there and play, because even if he would have returned to practice for all 3 days this week, he still hasn't played a game in 6 weeks. That still would only be 3 practices. It's not like he's a pocket quarterback where he can just sit back in the pocket, get rid of the ball so he doesn't get hit. he's a guy who runs, who uses his legs. So if he's not 100%, then he probably feels like he can't do what he normally does, which takes everything away from making Lamar Jackson. So I completely get where he's coming from, and I also get where the team is coming from, because this is the second year in a row, Mike, that he's finished the season injured. He missed the final 4 games of last season. They didn't make the postseason last year. They're going to be one and done, we all think, this year, unless they pull a massive upset, which nobody expects them to pull a massive upset. So he's missed 9 of his last 21 games that the team's played. So I think the question now is, if you're Baltimore and you've already offered him this big contract that he's turned down in the offseason, that he obviously wanted more guaranteed money because of what Deshaun Watson got in Cleveland. If you're Baltimore, are you in the same situation as Miami for different reasons, saying, we got to get a different guy in here. We're done with Lamar. We're going to find a guy, A, who can stay healthy, and B, who will accept a contract that we think is fair and reasonable.
The questions that need to be considered go like this. First of all, what's worse when you're trying to get the fully guaranteed contract that Deshaun Watson received? Coming back when you're basically healthy for a playoff game with a small risk of some sort of re-injury and playing well or playing bad, or finishing the last 2 seasons hurt and possibly pissing off your teammates because they think you don't care enough to come back and try to pursue a championship. You throw on top of it that if you're missing games late in each of the last 2 years, that makes it even harder to justify a fully guaranteed contract. So, at some point, the Ravens, I think, just need to come to the conclusion. We got 5 years out of Lamar Jackson, who was the 32nd pick in the draft. He was the MVP in his second season. That's great. We got no Super Bowl appearances out of it. But we got 5 solid seasons where we were contenders. And we've tried to sign him to a long-term deal. We tried to give him a significant amount of money for 2022 that he turned down because he had that Deshaun Watson contract in his head. And if you just can't reach an agreement with the player that you would like to stay on the team, no matter how hard you try, if he's driving a bargain that is so hard that you won't even consider entertaining accepting his proposal, it's no different than a guy who is injury prone to the point where you've got to move on. A guy who suffers a broken leg and can never play again. Whatever it is, whatever the circumstance is, it's just a factor that causes you to say we're going to move on. And I think, and who knows, this may change. Maybe they'll just let him walk away as a free agent. I think that they have pivoted at some point from intending to use the exclusive franchise tag next year to the non-exclusive tag to see what some other team would offer him if they're willing to give up 2 first-round picks or otherwise work out a trade with the Baltimore Ravens. But we're almost at the point where it would be useful for him to see what else is out there or what else isn't out there. I'm kind of, for the first time, I'm thinking maybe just let him become a free agent. Now, would he take less from another team just to stick it to the Ravens? Well, if he does, so be it. But he's not going to get a 5-year fully guaranteed contract at this point. I don't think he's going to get it from anyone. And if he really wants it, this is a point that I made previously, and I'll make it succinctly and then shut up. To get Deshaun Watson's contract, you got to be in Deshaun Watson's situation. You've got to say to the team, I'm never playing for you again. Trade me. And they have to say yes. And you have to manage to bring 4 teams to the table and play them against each other and tell one of them at the right time, I'm not signing with you, and hope that they swing back around and say, what if we give you a 5-year fully guaranteed contract? That's how Deshaun Watson got it. It was a unique set of circumstances that was engineered toward that end. They just don't fall out of the sky. Lamar Jackson thinks a 5-year fully guaranteed contract is going to fall out of the sky. And this is where you need an agent, Lamar. An agent will explain to you why you're not going to get a 5-year fully guaranteed contract, and maybe you should take the best offer the Ravens will make. My concern for him now, Charean, the best offer they would have made in August, probably wouldn't make it now.
That was going to be my point, Mike. I think he has passed up the best offer that he's going to see, and I just don't think that he's going to get the offer that they gave him in August. I just think it's going to be less than. I don't think any team is. And I think he's going to be very surprised if he does become a free agent, that no team steps up and gives him a Deshaun Watson type contract. And if I'm the Ravens, if I'm in their shoes, I probably do let him walk away. Now, maybe I come back and say, hey, here, we'll offer you this, or come back to the table if you want to come back here, but let him go see what's out there for him, because I don't think it's going to be anywhere near what the Ravens offered in August. I don't think it's going to come close to that, and I think he's going to be very surprised by that. But absolutely, he needs an agent to handle this. So now you've missed all this time. Let's say they lose this week. Are you just going to start negotiating with the Ravens next week? Like, how does that work if you're a player? He needs to go hire an agent and get some help in this, especially if he goes into free agency, Mike. I don't know as a player how you're going to be able to handle that.
And think about that. Deshaun Watson's agents handled the situation as it relates to his trade perfectly.
Yeah.
There arguably would be some constructive criticism as it relates to the other issues that Deshaun Watson has dealt with the past 2 years, including the refusal to negotiate at all when Tony Busby first got in touch with them about one of what ultimately was more than 20 plaintiffs who sued Deshaun Watson. That could have all been handled quietly without an 11-game suspension and without litigation and worrying about criminal indictment, etc. But as it relates to establishing a market for his services, first, convincing the Texans to trade him, then getting multiple teams to the table and getting the Browns, whether they intended to or not, to offer that 5-year fully guaranteed contract that he couldn't refuse. You can't do that without somebody who knows the right people to call. I mean, if the Ravens would say to Lamar Jackson, let's play this out. If they would say to Lamar Jackson, we've decided we're not going to use the franchise tag or the transition tag. Transition tag is another option as well, because it gives them a right to match. All right, go get your best offer somewhere else, and we'll match it. Let someone else negotiate the deal. Who's going to negotiate it? Who would even know to call when you don't have an agent, a good agent? I'm not saying any agent, not some run-of-the-mill person who's got no clients. I'm talking about somebody who is versed in representing quarterbacks, and there's a collection of folks out there who can do it. And I'm not going to start naming names, because then the ones I don't name will be pissed off. But it doesn't take much to figure out who they are. And without that, if who do you call? Who do you call? If you want to see who's interested in your services, how do you even begin that process? And yeah, they'll find you, but then you got to negotiate the deal. How do you negotiate the deal? What do you say? I want Deshaun Watson's contract, and they say, no, we'll give you this instead. What do you do? So maybe the transition tag is the way to go, because then Lamar Jackson goes out and tries to negotiate a contract with someone else. And now, it may be that no other team wants to negotiate the deal with him because they'll just assume the Ravens will match it. But fundamentally, this comes down to the refusal of Lamar Jackson to engage in practical, pragmatic, realistic negotiations. And I say that because what happened earlier this week, the day after the regular season ended, before they even played a playoff game, Roquan Smith, who plays a position that entails a far higher injury risk, he gets his long-term deal. And he's not represented. He represented himself, and he was able to work it out. What does that tell you, Charean, about the willingness of the Ravens to be fair with all players, even the ones who don't have agents?
Yeah, and they did it quickly, Mike. They started talking in mid-December and got this deal done, and the trade turned out to be a very good one for Baltimore, and a very good one, frankly, for Roquan Smith, because he wasn't getting that contract from the Bears. So all around, it worked out for Roquan Smith. It worked out for the Bears. It worked out for the Ravens. And it does tell you that the Ravens can get a deal done with the guy who negotiates for himself. And he landed the deal that he wanted. And he's happy with this deal, and the Ravens are happy with this deal. And if Lamar had taken that deal in August, I think he'd be looking back right now saying, man, I that was a great deal that I got, because having missed all these games for a second year in a row, I certainly wouldn't be getting that deal now. But he didn't take it, so he is where he is. And I think he's cost himself, Mike, a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree. And this whole transition tag thing, it's kind of fun to talk through these issues because it gives me a reason to focus and think where I otherwise may not have even thought of that. Because my first thought was just let him walk away. The transition tag is a way to...
Absolutely.
And it's cheaper than the franchise tag, and it's a way for the Ravens to sit back and say, hey, we want to keep this guy. we've tried to negotiate with him. If you get an offer from someone else, we'll decide whether or not to match it. And maybe another team will make an offer that the Ravens won't match. Or maybe another team just won't make an offer at all. Or maybe they'll offer something that is less than what the Ravens offered. But this could be the way that Lamar Jackson has his epiphany while he still could end up staying with the Ravens. Because I still think at the end of the day, they'd like to find a way to keep him.
Yeah.
But they need to break through this logjam of the inability to do the contract. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.